Hi guys, 2.5, we're in our unit on religious wars and absolutism. We've talked so far about a number of kings and queens, and from your knowledge, what is good about having that single leader? Also, what is not good about having that single leader? So write down some of those ideas and pause the video. Some of the things people said in class, it's good because that single leader can be a figurehead like Elizabeth I. She was able to unite the people through her image, through her identity. It's good because you don't have to wait for the decisions of other people to get things done. A single leader makes a decision and goes with it because they're the one in control. Um, Also, if there is a religious issue going on, that one leader can declare this will be our religion. But on the flip side, that also can displease people in the country if they don't agree with that religion. Some people said it is not a good idea because if the person is a bad leader and they are making quick decisions, that's not a positive thing. Also, it is easy to take power and become corrupted with that power. So today we're going to talk about some kings who took that power and took it a bit too far. To review, we're going back to England with the Tudor family. We had Henry VIII, he had his 6 wives, and the whole crisis with not having a son. He finally has his son Edward, who becomes king at 9 years old. He dies at 15, and then it goes to his oldest sister, Mary Tudor, who we know as Bloody Mary. And then because she dies after 5 years, no children, it goes to younger sister Elizabeth. Elizabeth is on the throne for about 45 years. She never gets married. She never has children. So we have to go back and figure out how do we choose the next king or queen. They go back in the family tree. They go to Henry VIII's sister. Remember Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, who came and asked Elizabeth for help. She left a son back in Scotland, so he has that royal bloodline. So they choose him to be the next king of England. So James I is going to be the first Stuart monarch. So if you're keeping track on your king sheet, there should be another line. You're going to write Stuart, because that's the name of this family, and James I. James was already king of Scotland. We saw that when his mother had been in Scotland and came down. He is invited to come to England and be King of England, but there's a small issue. Just like his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, he is Catholic. But he decides it is worth it to become a Protestant, to join the Church of England, because he wants to be king. And the King of England now, we know from the Act of Supremacy, is the supreme head of the Church of England. So James really wants to take that power. This is the same thing that Henry of Navarre does. Some things that we remember from James's rule is the colonies. This is really when England starts developing a colonial system. Before this, under Elizabeth, they are sort of experimenting and exploring some of these lands. But now, under James I, they establish settlements, specifically Jamestown. James is interested in creating not just like the Dutch going places and getting the products and bringing back the money. James wants to create England version 2 over in Virginia, over in the New World. And he knows that in the short term this will take a lot of money, a lot of time, but he believes that this initial investment will pay off in the long run. And it's true. I mean, the 13 colonies and that financial benefit that ends up helping England. But here now in 1603, 1605, it's going to take a lot of initial investment, especially with tobacco. James sets his hat on tobacco plantations. The Native Americans were smoking it and enjoying it. So James decides that England should start planting tobacco and selling it, and that will make them lots of money. But that takes time. Again, it takes a few years to figure out how to best plant and harvest the tobacco for the farmers. It takes time to build popularity in England. So again, lots of investment, lots of time, and eventually this will be very financially successful, but it's going to take a while. Going back to the idea of religion, James wants to prove to England that he is a Protestant. Even though in his heart he's probably Catholic, on the outside he wants to appear Protestant. So he sponsors a new translation of the Bible, the King James Version, is written in language that the common person would understand. He does this because now, as the head of a Protestant church, and sola scriptura, sola fide, that only the scripture, that the people should have a translation of the Bible that they understand, because that is a main idea of Protestant belief. So he pays for this new translation, this new version of the Bible, so that the people can read it easily. Something that happens is, even though he says he's a Protestant, but in his heart he's Catholic, just like with Elizabeth, there's always people who are unhappy with whatever decision a king has made. There's a group of Catholics led by a man named Guy Fawkes, and they want England to be Catholic again. So they plan to kill the king and all of Parliament by putting barrels of gunpowder under the Parliament building and blowing everyone up. So they'd kill Parliament and the king and replace everybody with Catholics. The government finds out about this and prevents it from happening, and the country's very relieved. And they still celebrate it today in England. November 5th is Guy Fawkes Day, because they're celebrating, one, that the Catholics were prevented from taking power, and that the English system works, that the system of monarchy continues to prevail even today. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Puritans. These are Protestants who believe that the Church of England is still too Catholic. All of the work that Elizabeth did to find a middle ground, the Puritans say that it is still too influenced by the Catholic Church. They want a pure Protestant church. So again, sola fide, sola scriptura. Their idea of a church would be 4 white walls, benches, and a Bible. And these are the people that end up coming to Plymouth Rock. They leave England because they disagree with the Church of England, and they're looking for a pure form of Protestantism. Last thing that James is remembered for is divine right. He starts this idea, or popularizes this idea, that yes, he is king because he has the right DNA, he came from the right family, but also that he rules because God has put him in this place of power. So essentially, his laws already have the thumbs up from God. If you are disobeying the king's laws, it's the same as disobeying God's laws. Okay, then our next king is James's son, Charles. Charles I, our second Stuart monarch. He, very similar to his dad, likes the idea of divine right. He likes the idea that his rules are essentially God's rules, so the people must follow them. The problem is that Charles takes advantage of this power. England had gone into a bit of debt from all of that investment that James got involved in, and in order to try and alleviate some of the debt, Charles begins heavily taxing the people. The people are really, really not pleased about this. They also don't like that Charles isn't even really pretending to be a Protestant. He very clearly is Catholic, and this becomes obvious when he chooses his wife, Henrietta Maria, who is French. She is French, she is Catholic, so the people of England are upset that Charles is not Protestant. Lastly, Charles takes this idea of divine right and my power comes from God to say that he doesn't need the people. He doesn't need Parliament. So for 11 years, Charles does not allow Parliament to meet. And if you remember from the Magna Carta, the purpose of Parliament is to prevent the king from having too much power. So we're going against the Magna Carta. The people are really, really upset. Charles says he doesn't need them until he runs out of money entirely. So just like when you're upset with your parents, but then you need $40, you're really sweet. So Charles calls together Parliament in 1640. It's called a short Parliament because they only meet for 3 weeks. He needs money. He's fighting rebellions in both Ireland and Scotland, trying to prove his power. Parliament is, they're a bit offended, and so Parliament continues meeting. And after that short Parliament, the long Parliament, the first law that they pass is the king is not allowed to disband Parliament. So they're trying to prevent from happening what Charles made happen. They make it illegal for the king to prevent Parliament from meeting. Another issue is, if you remember, Charles is king of Scotland and England, just like his dad James now, and he was giving preferential treatment to Scotland's parliament. He was giving them more freedom. So the English parliament says, well, why can't we have those freedoms? We're England, you're the King of England. You should be giving us equal, if not better treatment. So the people really, really are upset with Charles. This is going to lead to the English Civil War. Charles, again, asks for money to keep fighting the wars in Scotland and Ireland. Parliament is fed up and they say no. So Charles decides to form his own army. He's not going to rely on the people anymore. And his army is largely made up of nobility, Catholic nobility. And he calls his armies the Cavaliers. So Charles leads the Cavaliers, made up mostly of Catholics. Parliament's army is called the Roundheads, made up mostly of Protestants. So check out the video to the right of the Roundhead, Soundhead breakdance fighting. During the English Civil War, we are introduced to this character, Oliver Cromwell. He was a member of Parliament. He is a Puritan, so he likes the idea of pure Protestantism. He was also a member of the army, and many members of Parliament were asked to either choose Parliament or the army. But Oliver is chosen. He's allowed to do both. And they say, Oliver, we'd like you to be the leader of the army. And this army is called the New Model Army because they reorganize it. Before this, if the country needed to go to war, the king would call upon the nobles and say, nobles, I need your help. We're going to war. Send me soldiers. And soldiers were sort of first loyal to their noble and then to the king. Now, with the New Model Army, it is organized because we are all English. So your loyalty is to your country, not to nobility. While this war is going on, Parliament, run mostly by the Puritans, is working to de-Catholicize England. They change the rules of the Anglican Church. They get rid of any Catholic or pagan ceremonies. They stop celebrating Christmas. They don't celebrate birthdays. They outlaw theater. Essentially, they get rid of fun because if it's not in the scriptures, then it's not pure. Fighting goes on for 3 years. For the first few years, there's really no clear winner. So it's between the Cavaliers, Roundheads, no clear winner. Then each side wins a few battles, and finally in 1649, Charles is captured. So the war ends, essentially. Parliament has to decide, what do we do with Charles? Do we get rid of him? Do we put him on trial? And they say, okay, the whole thing was that Charles was not following due process as established by the Magna Carta. So Parliament follows due process. They put Charles on trial for treason. He is found guilty, and then he is beheaded. And this is known as regicide, meaning the killing of a king. Charles' family gets the heck out of England because they are afraid they would come to the same fate as Charles. So they go to France, home of the mother, and a Catholic country. Now, Parliament has to figure out, what do? We just got rid of our king. England has been a monarchy for hundreds of years. So they decide no longer is it a monarchy, a single ruler. It is ruled by the people, the common people, or a republic, and they have a representation. They choose Cromwell to be the leader of Parliament because he had been successful in leading the army. And Cromwell does some good things and some bad things. We'll start with the bad. First is he actually continues fighting the Irish and the Scots, mainly to fight Catholicism, to establish pure Protestantism in those areas. Still today in parts of Ireland, Cromwell is a dirty word for the Catholics. For those that are Protestant, they think he's pretty good. So that was still a very violent part of Cromwell's time in power. One good thing is the Navigation Act. In order to help the debt, to try and get rid of some of the debt, which was a big issue for the English people, Cromwell passes this law that says any product arriving in England, must arrive on an English boat. So if you need spices, don't buy it off a Dutch boat. Buy it from an English boat. Therefore, all of this money will stay within England. The goal is to help repair the economy. Another thing he does to help the economy is he welcomes back the Jews because, as we've seen before, that they are very skilled in business, in banking, and the economy in England needed help at this time. Because he's doing so many wonderful things, they give him a special title, Lord Protector. He's not king, but he essentially is king, and he lets this power go to his head. Fortunately, his power doesn't last too long. He dies in 1658. And again, Parliament is wondering, what do? We don't have hereditary succession anymore. We don't have a king. I guess we could go back to the army, but that doesn't work long term. So they do finally decide to go back to having a king. Less than 15 years after Charles I is executed, they call on his son, Charles, so he's now Charles II, call him back from France and say, "We're so sorry. Please, we want you to be our king." Charles was actually quite happy to accept. He There's not a lot that is attributed to him except for having a good time. I think that makes a lot of sense that when you had been in exile for a number of years, you're given back a pretty sweet job and you want to celebrate. Okay, that's it for 2.5.